glad that we were able to hold this talk. It was touch and go for a minute, but we haven't seen a drop of rain. So we're all here, and you are making it to the last day, the last hours of this really wonderful exhibition. So thank you. You may have seen the write-up in the Washington Post. We were very pleased to be featured with a big half-page, really, image. So that was great. Congratulations to all of the artists.
Yeah, great job.
Just a little housekeeping before we get to the interesting juice of things. This is the last day of the show. Our next exhibition opens on September 29th with a reception at this same time, 5 to 7. It will be a solo exhibition of Caitlin Teal Price, who is a DC-based photographer known for her portraiture, though this show won't have a human figure in it. So new work, exciting work, challenging herself, and I'm very proud to be able to give her the opportunity to show that work. We have some really exciting programming that goes along with that show. I'm not going to give you dates because I realized you're probably not going to remember them anyway, but check our website. We will have 2 creative responses, which has been a great program that we debuted with Boris Willis, who is here. We still talk about it, I would say, on a weekly basis. And Michael Booker, actually, that's where we met Michael. He did another of our great premiere creative responses. So we carry that on with each exhibition. For Caitlin's show, we will have a public historian speaking about time and time capsules, how we record and think about history. And then we will also have, Sarah, remind me who our second creative response is?
Shannon Brogdon Grantham. She's a photo conservator for the Smithsonian.
Photo conservator for the Smithsonian. So that relates, you'll see Caitlin is a photographer who in this exhibition is doing some violence and destruction to photographs. So some interesting perspectives on her show. We are also sending Caitlin down to the National Gallery to do a talk. She will be in conversation with John Pilson, who I believe is the current chair of the photography department at Yale. We will also have Dorothy Moss from the National Portrait Gallery come here to speak about the work. And then Caitlin and I will be in conversation. So a lot happening with that show. We also have our Sue Werbican sculpture coming to the park any day now. I told you I'm not going to give you dates. I'm not giving you that one either. But a lot of really exciting things happening before the end of the year. So please keep in touch. If you're not on our mailing list, sign up today. Otherwise, you'll be hearing a lot from us. And before I get off the stage, I want to give some thank yous. So thank you to the staff for another wonderful exhibition and event. Thank you to our artists. Thank you, artists. We couldn't have this beautiful show without you. And thank you to our board, some of whom are here tonight. We couldn't do this without you, and RCC, our program sponsor. Thank you. It really takes the village, and thank you to all of you for being here. So without further ado, Erica Harrison is going to lead us in conversation with Michael Booker, Timothy Harper, and Laura Beth Conopinski. I almost got it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Yes, just to echo what Lily said, thank you all so much for coming. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to talk to Laura Beth and Tim and Mike. Catherine Mann and Rachel Goriola were not able to make it tonight. Catherine is doing a residency at Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art, and that means that, as she should be, she is making art in her own amazing way. And you know, Rachel just had some conflicts, so We are really appreciative of you guys being here and making the trek, and glad that Florence just decided to not be in this area, but we are still thinking about the people that it is affecting. So hopefully everybody stays safe and not dry. So I kind of wanted to get started at the beginning with talking about how artists create work. And I think for a lot of people that seems like kind of, oh, well, you just pick up something and you start drawing or painting or something. But for a lot of artists, it all starts with research. So I wondered if each of you would kind of take us through your research process and how you sort of either divine inspiration for your work or start the process of investigating the source material. So Mike, since you're right here.
Well, you mentioned just kind of picking up and going versus researching things and researching source material first. I started these pen drawings because I felt like I was too bogged down in researching things. And so, like I was doing a lot of paintings before when I was heavy in researching and thinking about a lot of things that I wanted to make sure I had right. And I felt like that was hindering my creative process because I was trying to plan instead of being in the moment. And so I started these drawings with just a pen and paper, like the most basic tools I could find. And I just started from there. And it started to grow, and my ideas have started to grow. Like right now I'm trying to create this whole utopia where people of color have kind of broken up and trying to build this self-sustainable community. And I've been researching a lot of like African American culture, hip hop culture, a lot of things like that. And so I kind of have a list, like everything, all of my works there, and a lot of my other works, they're all hip hop lyrics and rap lyrics. So I have like a list of things I've taken, different lyrics I've taken, and kind of think about like how I can apply those into drawings, but also how those things can relate to the current state of people of color in America and people of color all over the world, and kind of reflect that back into my work. So I do a lot of research looking back at my own photographs that I take. I go hiking a lot and I go other places and pose for different things that I want to see myself or see the drawings. But also source materials from, Googling like tons and tons of different things. And it ends up kind of collaging all these ideas together to get a very, very loose idea of what the drawing will be. And then I guess I start from there.
Do you listen to the music that you derive the lyrics from, or?
I do, but more now I just look at them, like just look up the lyrics so I can see them right in front of me. And it's also important that I'm using that. It's very, very old school, like Southern hip hop in the 90s and things, mostly. And it's important for me. It's kind of what I grew up on, but it's also something that's not very common that you see, like within fine art. And I want to include that and include some of the things they were talking about way back then. Some of those things they're talking about then is happening now. And I felt like it was very relevant for my work.
Yeah. So I just did want to say also, if you have any questions, this is a conversation with the artist, but also with you. So if anybody has a burning question, please raise your hand and we can answer that. So when you're doing you said you were doing a lot of research for your paintings prior to this series. And so what did that constitute? Were you going to museums? Were you looking at art books? Were you collaging from them?
It was a lot of reading. I have a background in quilt making, and some of the research came from my own family. My grandmother quilted, my mother quilted, and there was a book called, I forget the name of the book as soon as I bring it up, but Hidden Symbols. What was the name of that book? Anyway, there's a book that talks about like some of the hidden symbolism in quilt making, especially during like the Underground Railroad, where quilts were used as signs for the traveling slaves. So because they're illiterate, they use quilts to hide messages and meanings in them. And so more recently, our historians are trying to say that never happened. It's not true because it's not written down anywhere. And it's like it wasn't supposed to be written down. It was oral. It was an oral tradition. And plus, they were illiterate. They couldn't read or write, so how would it be written down? And so like these ideas of these artifacts and these symbols kind of get filtered and lost throughout time. Like researching a lot about that, it really came into play in terms of thinking about my work and where it stands and how it will be viewed like 1,000 years from now. And so trying to document the present, like for the future, like as the past, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm interested in whether or not any of those symbols end up in the drawings that you have here or the paintings.
Ideas from them, what I like to do is kind of make up my own.
Okay.
Because I like the idea of like, is it an actual symbol or not? And just the idea of this information that's kind of been lost throughout time and filtered throughout time. We think back to like the pyramids or the Great Wall of China or Stonehenge or Easter Island, like all these different places that's been built over time, and the information, how it was built, it's kind of been lost. And we don't understand like a lot of that. People think it's aliens or like whatever. But you don't understand exactly how that was built. And that really interests me in terms of when we look back into the past, like losing so much. And so trying to create and hide things within some of my drawings that may relate to certain symbols, but may also be totally just made up at the same time.
Because I was interested about that, the golden triangle that's in, so Mike's work is behind the front desk, the drawings and paintings, and there's a figure in the drawing that's called Just in Case the Devil Man Doesn't Know, that has a large golden triangle, and I just wondered what that was.
Well, like the triangle is just a symbol, like a common symbol in a lot of different religions and culture for strength, like the Holy Trinity, in Christianity, of course. But it's just a symbol for strength. But I also wanted to just think about it as this big, large gold chain with a big, large charm, like very obnoxious, Flavor Flav charm as well.
So with the recent Nike ad,
Yes.
and that figure has the Nike shoes on,
Mhm.
I just wondered if that takes on any new meaning.
This is interesting you bring that up. So Colin Kaepernick being the face of Nike now, and it's interesting to see like what's all going on with that. Whether like I'm from Mississippi, I feel like I'm dominating this.
Well,
Have a look at it.
I just wondered.
Okay. But I just read something today. I'm originally from Mississippi, and the governor of Mississippi, Hogan, has now declared that Mississippi's law enforcement and anybody else in Mississippi will not ever purchase Nike like again.
What?
And so it's interesting to see like the stances that people are taking around this, especially knowing that the original protest was never about what people are trying to twist it into be in terms of like being against the military and things like that. It was never about that. It was more for civil rights and trying to stop police brutality. So just thinking about like these stances that people are taking on the burning of jerseys and burning of Nike products and things like that is very interesting to see. It just reveals a lot about our society.
Yeah. So I think going into maybe more of a conversation about how we're reflected in the future, would kind of take us to Tim's work and how some of our items that we've discarded and maybe don't care as much about now, but then they become important later, like the shoes or the brand, might take us into your research process or how you think about your work.
This is better on the right. Now, one thing that he said, Mike said right at the beginning, I thought was interesting, was talking about getting kind of stuck thinking too much about what you're going to do. And I always remember I had an art teacher that would say, sometimes you just got to ready, fire, aim, meaning just got to get into doing stuff if you get thinking too much. But I do, there is, I get research, I go to a lot, I look at a lot of other artists, go to gallery shows and online, but I also just, for my work, I spend a lot of time just outside walking around. I like, my favorite place, I have a favorite salvage yard in Richmond that I go to, and I don't know why I've always found that so interesting, but just walking around in there, and it's they go tear down buildings and they pull everything out that anybody could possibly ever want to use again. So plumbing and doors, there's an ATM machine in there that looks like it was the first ATM machine ever built. Everything you could think of, and it's all kind of overgrown, and just walking around in there, that's where I get a lot of things from there, but even just seeing how nature kind of takes it back over is interesting. But doing that and just walking around town, or even just around my house, I guess is part of the research process, and I think I said in my little write-up thing. Part of it, try to just take time to notice things that I usually would just walk by, or used to just walk by, and there's things like that everywhere you go. There's always something, I think just like the idea that there's always something new to learn about anything, even if it's something as, you know, mundane as some old machine or some found vegetation and things. If you just taking the time to kind of notice it and discover it. So I spend a lot of time just walking either in parks or just downtown and kind of urban areas in Richmond, and there's just a lot of things once you start to look down and around you, all the places you don't see when you're driving in your car. There's just all sorts of things, and I think that's kind of how it started. I would do that and say, oh, that's interesting. That little piece of metal looks like, I don't know what I would always think of what else could be used that for. It's just sitting in the gutter, you know, like something that fell off a car or whatever, and at some point decided to start collecting those things. So I suppose that's part of the research process.
When you're walking around the salvage yard and you saw the plants sort of taking over, was that how you came up with the idea to insert vegetation or organic materials into the found objects?
Yeah, I don't think that, I think the first time I did that was once I started to kind of collect things. It started little metals and wood. I always thought were interesting because you can kind of see time pass in those, right? You see the wood weather and metal get rusty, and then it was, as with most ideas that people think I have that are good, it was someone else's idea. They brought me, what's cool about it, making things out of found objects is that once people find out about it, people start bringing me things. So that's the best part of that. Friends and family, so I think that was my wife's idea. She found this cool little, I think I have put them back there, thistle thing, and she said, would you want something like this? And I was like, yeah, that would be cool with some rusty metal. And so that kind of got me to start looking at natural things too. Went from there.
Huh.
I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, I wonder about the music then. How did that become part of it?
Yeah, and that came from finding an old music box we had in our attic that was broken. My wife should say, you can have this if you want. And we were cleaning out the attic, and I got it to work again. I just at some point tinkering with it, thought it would be interesting to kind of include that, not thinking that I would end up making a lot of those.
Huh.
But I guess also I've always, you can see with these, I like old machines, and sometimes if I don't know what to do, I just get a sewing machine and take it apart. And I guess, well, going back to what Mike said about just doing things, getting into doing things, well, no, overthinking it, I think the brain works a little differently when you're doing things with your hands. And so if I don't know what to do, I'll just sit there and take apart a typewriter or a sewing machine or something like that. Any kind of old analog machine that's made of metal that has screws you can take apart. You know, I just always want to see how they work inside and how all the mechanisms work together. And I think that you can just think a little differently when you're doing something with your hands. So that's my go-to. I don't know what to do. It's to take something apart.
Has everybody had a chance to try the knobs of the kinetic sculptures? Yeah.
And I really like some of the dried flowers that, as you're listening to the music, the flowers rotating, but the beam of light coming down onto the sculpture, and you see this video on the wall behind you of this flower turning around. It's fabulous.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of sort of an unintended thing when I first started to make them. It wasn't until I got them somewhere where I had good light, and someone said, hey, look at the shadows that's making.
Yeah.
But it wasn't something meant to do, but it turns out to be pretty cool.
And so Laura Beth, how you have a different approach, I'm sure, to making the glass. Well, we start with the environments, and then we sort of branch out into these more figurative works. So how's your process work out?
It kind of, I have multiple stages. I think that for me, it usually, I don't want to say that it starts with an idea, but it actually starts more with a feeling. It's an emotional, my art making is mostly intuitive, the process of it. So my research happens usually when I'm not making. So because a lot of, as far as like starting with a feeling or emotion, my process is kind of like traveling back to where that stems from. A lot of these pieces are kind of like working through different conflicts, situations that are either in my life or that I see observationally around me, and so I guess my process just kind of comes to observation of, and it's I would say mostly of other humans, or human interaction is mostly what this is.
From the outside or interactions that you're a part of?
Both. Yeah, definitely both. I definitely have a different perspective when I'm involved. But that's, yeah, I guess that's sort of my process. As far as with the part of making, the actual formulation of glass or whatever materials that I use, I mean, it's a pretty complicated technical research part of how to actually put things together. So I sort of feel like I work in two very separate forms that I kind of piece together.
As far as like the what is that, the right brain that's super technical and the left
Yeah,
brain that's
exactly.
super like
Yeah.
emotional?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the emotion aspect is interesting, especially from intuitive work, because most of the time you are trying to bring something up and then and resolve it in a way.
Yeah.
Does the work that you make get you to that point, or is it always an aspect of still reliving the conflict or what you observe?
Both, for sure. I mean, you know, when you spend weeks, months with one piece, there's a lot that happens in your mind, you know, working through things. And so I think that each of these pieces are very different. The new work, so it's these pieces on the pedestals, all kind of deals with the same, I don't want to say issue, but relationship, which I talked about in my artist statement, and happy to share with another question or whatever, but is mostly about my mother, my relationship to my mother, who she was as a person, and but kind of like having months to spend with these pieces to definitely work through some of like the questions, sort of a lot of instability that I still felt with that relationship. So yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely some aspect to making any piece of art that you get to some kind of resolution, but it's definitely not always just finished.
Yeah, well, I know when we've had multiple groups, and I was telling Tim earlier that we've had a meditation group here and some school groups here over the course of the exhibition, and a lot of people really look at these glass pieces and the figures and can identify, and whether or not they're seeing you know, a person who's relieved of their burden, or if they're looking at you know, kind of the conflicts that we're having in society, or if it's something a little larger, but they do seem to talk to everybody in a way that they can find that. I wonder if...
That's great.
Yeah, the trying to resolve the human conflict, and maybe it's okay that there's so much tension, and that you don't necessarily get to that point. And I wonder too, in Mike, in your work, there's a lot of layers, and the emotional layer, I think, is maybe one part that I'm always trying, because it seems, it's so optimistic, and it's so powerful to have this idea that these giants can inhabit this beautiful utopia, and everybody can support each other and remember their ancestors and honor them. And do you find that when you're making this work, and same with Tim, I mean, this is a pretty uplifting, beautiful kinetic sculptures with the sound, that you are making these beautiful objects just so you can kind of feel better about things?
I would say for me, most definitely, there's enough stereotypes, and there's enough media attention, and there's enough images of people of color shown in a negative light. And I just, especially within recent politics and everything that's going on now, I just made a conscious decision just to say I want to make uplifting, positive images. And even though, like, I think about this place as a utopia that I'm building, like the weight of being a person of color, like, it's still there, and it's still present, it's inescapable for those people. So there'll always be that duality of like both sides. So I just made a conscious decision for myself. Like, I just want to see us in a positive light.
Yeah.
So.
And when the meditation group was here, we were talking, Tim, about your sculptures and how the decayed artifacts, even though they're fragile and the organic material is no longer living, it's almost like they've been celebrated. That you've not only taken these analog materials that we don't value anymore, but also these dried flowers that you've preserved somehow. How do you do that, by the way? And made them really special, and given them another opportunity to be beautiful, which is fantastic. So I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, all these things I found and collected because I think they're interesting, and I like the idea of giving them another chance at life kind of thing, things that are thrown away that I think are interesting and still have some value. So I guess I didn't set out with any idea of whether I was going to make anything positive or dark or what, without any real idea, but I just to shine a spotlight on things that are interesting and everyday things, that there are interesting things everywhere. That kind of idea.
So you mentioned, and please, if anybody has a question, just, okay. So you mentioned the dark, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so with the light, there's always the dark, because you can't have the light without the dark.
Mm-hmm. And
I wonder if, that my reaction when I was in your studio was that I wanted to play all of them at once, and I got this really like goosebumpy, tingly sensation of it was kind of dark. It became sort of apocryphal, and there was this element of, oh boy, now I'm transported into this other space. And I noticed that most people, when they come to the gallery, they gravitate towards one, and they'll play one at a time, which is wonderful. But when I had groups in here, I would have them all close their eyes, and then I would do multiples, and then it changes the way that you think about it.
Yeah.
And did you think about that? Do you think about that?
No, and I hadn't really thought about that until you brought it up in my studio. That was interesting, but I try to not say a whole lot of specific things about why I made anything in particular, mostly because when people come tell me what it means to them, it's usually better than anything I could have said. That's interesting. So, and it matters just as much what it means to somebody else, I think, as opposed to if I were to say, now specifically it's about this, and this, it would shut that down. And I don't want to do that, because if it means something interesting to you that's different from what I thought of, that's great. Sometimes doing this, you can just get someone to pay attention to you, and capture their interest for 2 minutes. That's a win. So I hadn't really thought about it that way. Oh, back to your thing about preserving flowers. There's a gallery in Richmond that had work in some some, and one of the owners used to be a florist, and he told me to spray it with hairspray. Yeah, makes it, and it makes it a little stronger, you know, especially when you're driving down bumpy highway, looking in the mirror, going, oh, it's
Do you want to talk about sort of I mean, we talked about the emotional levity of the works, but maybe how you use some of that conflict to also respond in a positive way?
Sure. I mean, I think that working through giving yourself the space and time to actually work through any conflict is positive, no matter what the outcome is. I kind of said this before, but I feel like there's never really an end to anything. So I feel like, I don't know, I see lots of things in cycles. So it's always, I guess I just always feel like there will continually be positives and negatives to everything, always.
So what do you hope that people will get from your work or when you do your work?
Yeah, the primary thing, I think, for me, is to have someone just reflect on themselves. That's really sort of what this work is, you know, just like what you said, Tim. I mean, it's so different, you know, when you're making it versus when you're viewing it, and just being able to kind of like exchange or hear about, you know, thank you for sharing, you know, what people have said, but just hearing about it from another perspective, I think is helpful to just sort of have that exchange of knowledge and experience perspective. I don't know if I really have any expectations as far as like what I want people to come away with from my work, other than just literally taking some time to look at it, observe, and reflect on what it is to them, like what it means to them. Yeah.
That term reflect is that related to the medium that you choose to make your art in?
Good one. Well, I mean, actually, yes and no. Like, for sure. It's glass. I've been working with glass as my primary medium for over 15 years now, longer probably. And it's something like that as a material is something that is always interesting to me. There are always strange nuances and things that you can't predict no matter how well you know it. But even actually, sorry, this is kind of an offshoot thought to that.